Okay, so going to continue some of our discussions on the novel Tom Appleby by Jackie French, which, as I mentioned, is a really good text for a book for students year 4 to 7. It can be quite advanced in the way that it's talking about, you know, the history of Australia. Some of the words can be a little bit tricky because of the time period that it's set in, but really, really good to, you know, just understand what it was like to be in London, be a child, you know, going through the level of difficulty that this particular boy, Tom Appleby, is, and also coming on the first fleet to Australia. So the chapter I wanted to look at today was chapter 27, which is really Tom's first impression of or first look at Australia when he arrives. And, you know, not quite up to the expectations that he had. He was quite hopeful. He'd come from London and he was leaving London for a very long time, if not forever. And, you know, it was curious about what it was going to be like, and a bit hopeful. Maybe it was a chance for a new beginning and so on. So to his intense disappointment, Tom was not assigned to one of the work parties that were the first ashore. He was too young, too skinny to be regarded as a worthwhile labourer. Nor was Tom present when the colony was formally established in a ceremony on shore on the 26th of January, 1788. Women and children were kept aboard the ship until the 6th of February, although discipline had been relaxed enough to allow them time on deck. Tom scrambled up the hatchway and stared out. The world washed green and blue in front of him, too bright to look at directly after the darkness below. But he could smell the land more clearly now, a scent almost like pine oil, but not quite, and the scent of sunlight too. So just there on like the olfactory sense of the smell, you know, even saying a scent almost like pine oil, but not quite. It's like you can smell something. It kind of smells like something he's smelled before, but not quite, you know. So even having a look at the, you know, the comparison there to something he knows, but then it not quite being that sort of gives you, starts giving you an insight into the fact that it's a different, very different place. Slowly, his eyes adjusted. He looked around. His first thought was shock at the wrongness, the too harsh light, the too blue depth of the sky. So have a think about why they would put too harsh, too blue. So that repetition there really emphasizing the fact that it's just like wrong, like there's something really different about it. What have I done here? I've lost my little spot. What was it? Chapter 27. There we go. And the trees were the wrong color, a washed out green. So not the green he's used to, something different again. The distance was far too blue and the rocks too golden brown. So really interesting images in here that illustrate how different this place is for him. The depth of his despair. Oh, geez. There we go. The depth of his despair shocked him. Had he really expected that somehow this land would be like the country he had left, his home of 2 years ago, the village, the hedges, and perhaps in his printing shop? It seemed so enormous. The trees, not even the right color trees, reaching to the horizon. So it just goes on forever now. That's all he has. The ships in the settlement on shore looked tiny compared to the vastness of the land. So like just huge and so different. And, you know, there's this like, yeah, the depth of the despair shocked him. Like what was he expecting? It's like he's always, and we see this, like he had a really like lovely life before his father passed away. His father was, you know, a printer in this printing shop. And before he died, you know, Tom lived really comfortably. He had food, he was warm, he was safe. And then his father died and it was like, that's it, went to the magistrate, became an orphan. Then, you know, a whole series of things between being a chimney sweep and then being convicted of stealing and then being transported to Sydney in the first fleet and spending 8 months, you know, as a convict inside, you know, the ship, which he thought he was going to be sentenced to death. So that was still like a bit of an escape there. And now he's here in Australia, like so far away. So that's a totally different world back then in 1788. Like nothing else exists now. Courage, he thought. I've survived worse. I'll steal, lie, or cheat if I have to, but I'll survive this too. So there is this underlying theme of courage, and this cloak that he has. So it'll probably come up again. There we go. He felt the warmth of the courage cloak around him, a deeper warmth than the hot sun on his back. And suddenly, as he stood and watched, the thought came to him, this land is beautiful. So now with the motif of the courage cloak coming back, and giving him that warmth, giving him that sense of safety, he's now able to look on the land a bit differently, you know. So what was really like too harsh, too blue, washed out green, and all of the things now is actually, you know, he's got a different perspective on it. This land is beautiful. Shift in perspective there. The harbour stretched out in bright blue fingers, interesting metaphor, edged with platforms of flat rock and the oddly coloured forest and tiny coves of pure white sand. A flock of birds rose above the trees with weird, harsh cries. They were too far away to see clearly, but Tom had an impression of brightness and unbelievable colour. So lots of contrasting images here, you know. You've got like the weirdness and the harshness of it, but then you've got this beauty and it's being bright and it's like unbelievable color, you know, there's such a vividness. Unlike the adults, Tom had not yet been taught what beauty was. Many of the older settlers would never see the slim white trunks of gum trees, the golden heads of wattle, as anything but overly vivid splashes of color on a barren land. Even the birds were alien, vulgarly bright, their unfamiliar calls too strange to ever think of as musical. Now, though, when another flock of birds flew by, all green and red and blue, Tom caught his breath. The soft waves slapped at the rocky shores or flopped against the sand. The island sparkled in the harbour. Far in the distance, smoke wafted up softly in the sky. So we can really see how there's that shift. Tom's already becoming kind of accustomed to it, and he's younger, so he can sort of have a different perspective than what people who have been used to living in, you know, in the English countryside, and with, you know, English things are coming here and they're like, this isn't, you know. And as the novel progresses, actually one of the things that the colony really struggle with is that they just don't have their comforts from home. There's an absolute abundance of food, but they want their salted pork and their bread and their, you know, their rum and their, you know, the things that they're used to. They don't want the things. They don't want to be fishing and gardening and, you know, eating oysters from the ocean. You know, they want their things. They want their, you know, their thing. So that's what people really struggle with. And what ends up happening is there's this real deep experience of isolation from their past world, and you know, where they've come from, and like this deep despair that they like can't get back there. But Tom, because he's come when he's 8 years old, like he's actually able to adjust really, really well, and his life actually gets exponentially better, develops relationships, and he's well fed, his tummy's full, he's warm, he's got sort of sense of belonging. Like this is what he's able to develop. And a big part of that, is because he's come when he's younger, and he's able to adapt to that. So that's quite important, where it says, unlike the adults, Tom had not yet been taught what beauty was, you know. So then there's, you know, I'm always reminded of that statement, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, or beauty is like, it's totally based on perspective. What someone finds beautiful, another might not, you know. So, but for him, it's about having courage and being adaptable and being able to change with where he's gone and being able to see it from a more positive perspective. So I think got some pretty cool messages in there. So hopefully that helps in terms of, you know, having a look at that particular chapter. And I think the key with breaking down novels or books or texts of any kind is don't see it as the whole book. Yes, it can be like very overwhelming to read a book that's, you know, over 300 pages, especially when you're, you know, in year 4 or 5. But if you can actually focus on particular chapters and understand what's going on in like more of a microcosmic sense, or take a snippet of something, then you do actually end up understanding the text as a whole, you know. And that's a really key thing to think about in English, because even when you start going on to write essays and things, they're not asking you for a summary of, you know, 300 pages. You don't have to like memorize all that. What they want to know is, can you pick a couple of really good quotes that illustrate meaning and human experience? So important. Cannot emphasize that enough. You know, what's Tom's experience here? How is that contrasted to the other people around him? You know, then what's the experience of the Indigenous people? That's going to be different as well. So lots of questions here. So we'll keep going into this one.